You're listening to the Bears Barroom Radio Network, and the following program is suitable for all audiences.
Paxton for three! Yeah! Yeah!
In 1993, when Chicago Bulls guard John Paxson sunk the series-winning shot in Game 6 of the NBA Finals, Mark Schanowski was there reporting. In 1988, when Michael Jordan beat Dominique Wilkins in what is considered the greatest, most controversial slam dunk duel of all time, David Schuster was there reporting.
What kind of expectations do you set for yourself individually going into year 3?
In 2010, when Derrick Rose said,
"Why can't I be the MVP of the league? Why can't I be the best player in the league? I don't see why. Why can't I do that?"
It was Mark Schanowski who asked the question.
It is my distinct honor to present the 2010-2011 NBA Most Valuable Player Award to Derrick Rose of the Chicago Bulls.
In 2011, when Rose accepted the Most Valuable Player Award to become the youngest MVP in the history of the league, David Schuster was there reporting. Schanowski, Schuster, two of Chicago's most accomplished NBA reporters. This is Sharpshooters.
And welcome into the latest edition of the Sharpshooters. I'm David Schuster, and he is my favorite hoops partner, Mr. Mark Schanowski. How you doing, Mark?
I'm doing well. You know, watching that game last night with Donovan Mitchell and Jamal Murray, I was just marveling at the level of offensive proficiency. I mean, we've talked about the shooting backgrounds, the bubble, and not much defense being played, which is legitimate, but we're seeing some incredible offense, stuff that, you know, if you look back over the history of the NBA, those performances would stack up with just about anybody. I mean, you talk about two guys having a pair of 50-point games in a series. I guess only Michael and Allen Iverson were able to accomplish that. So
I love your tweet last night where you said the league is in good hands with so many young players, and that's 100%. We could go down. There's about a dozen players, maybe more, that have just shined throughout this bubble. I don't know if the bubble is the reason why, but there has been some breakout performances, you know, and obviously in this Denver-Utah series, you know, two guys, you know, one on each team has just been really incredible. This has been fun. I mean, I've enjoyed every minute of it so far.
And Jamal Murray was a guy coming out of Kentucky that I really like. You know, the way John Calipari structures his teams, he usually has 10 McDonald's All-Americans, so nobody plays more than 25 minutes or so, and no one really gets a chance to showcase what they can be as an individual offensive player. I thought Jamal Murray was underutilized at Kentucky, and then when he came into the league, people were saying, is he a point guard? Is he a shooting guard? He's playing the point, but he really is a shooting guard. And now he can throw all those designations away because he's just an elite scorer. He doesn't always play like this. I mean, the last three games, it's been 50, 42, and 50, but he had a pair of games in the teens earlier in the series. So Denver is a team that's kind of hard to get a handle on. You know, they've had some injuries. They go deep into their roster. And so you're not going to get one guy always taking over. But Murray has shown, as Devin Booker did before him, as Damian Lillard, who we already knew was great, there are a lot of prolific scorers in this league, and it's going to be fascinating to see how some teams can build around these amazing talents.
More on what's going on in the bubble. Some of the series have already reached the second round. We'll talk about all the games, and some of them are coming down to the wire, specifically in the Western Conference in the first round. Some really good games. We'll talk about that in just a second. We should also tell everybody that we have Sarah Kustok, good friend of everybody's.
Yeah, people are saying get on with it. We want to get to Sarah. And Sarah, we'll talk about Karis LeVert, who's been another breakout player for the Brooklyn Nets.
And then if for having Sarah on, this should really be a video, because then we would have 100 times more people that would tune in. I'd even tune in 100 times more. No, we'll have Sarah coming on in just a little bit, but obviously there's been some big breaking news earlier today in the world of basketball. John Thompson, the legendary coach, bigger than life coach, and I say that figuratively and literally. He passed away earlier this morning at the age of 78. We're recording this on Monday. And I got to tell you, from my own experiences, Georgetown came in here a lot during the years, when DePaul was really a good program and John Thompson would be front and center. And honestly, I mean, he was a bigger-than-life person. I mean, his successes, as a basketball coach at Georgetown, they go without question. 595, I think, career victories, 3 Final Fours, 1 NCAA championship in '84. Brought so many great players to Georgetown. Patrick Ewing and Allen Iverson specifically, and so many others. But he was as much a success off the court also, Mark. And I think of Iverson for just a second. Iverson said that John Thompson saved his life, literally saved his life, because, listen, Allen Iverson, I guess you can use this, was, sort of a wild and crazy guy in his high school days and would get into some trouble. And even when he got to Georgetown, I'm sure he had not shed that part of his personality or part of his persona. But John Thompson turned him into not only a serious basketball player, but more of a serious person in life. So John Thompson leaves behind an incredible legacy, and he will never be forgotten.
Well, the statement that Allen Iverson put out showing his love and affection for his old coach, and he said that, they would see each other and they wouldn't even talk about basketball. It was just about the life lessons that he learned from John Thompson. And, some people during the time when they were at their heyday in the early to mid 80s thought that he ruled that program with an iron fist, and there was no room for individuality, that everyone had to fall in line with the way he envisioned the program. And that there was a knock that his players were sheltered from the media and they weren't allowed to express themselves as individuals. Well, what he was trying to do was prepare them for the game of life, for big things that are a lot more important than basketball. And if that meant making greater attention to academics, making sure that you were doing the right things off the court, that was important to John Thompson too. He had an incredible program. You rattled off all the success that they had at Georgetown, but when you consider those teams, Patrick Ewing stayed there for 4 years, which was almost unheard of back then, and he built great teams around Ewing. They had a lot of success afterwards, and when he was a figure that you always heard from throughout his life after he retired as a head coach. He was a commentator for a while, but even when he wasn't, he was always working for causes to try to help people.
I think of that Big East Conference back in those days, and legendary coaches. I mean, him and Carnesecca and Raleigh Massimino and
Jim Boeheim.
Jim
Calhoun.
I mean, you're talking Calhoun. My God, you're talking about Hall of Famers, all of them. Right. And I can never forget. I mean, Carnesecca with those ugly sweaters, and Raleigh Massimino. He reminded me of Louis from Taxi, Louis De Palma or whatever his name is, Danny DeVito. That's what Raleigh Massimino was. I mean, just great. If you're a basketball junkie like we both are, right. I mean, how could you not like those days? So again, both on and off the court as a basketball coach and a coach of life, he leaves behind a hell of a legacy.
Yeah, I'll never forget the one time Syracuse and Georgetown were fierce rivals back then, and he showed up with one of those ugly sweaters, just
to stick it.
Yeah. Well, actually, that was with Carnesecca.
Oh, Carnesecca. Yeah. Okay. And I thought you were going to say Thompson showed up with an ugly sweater to sort of mimic him.
Well, he did with Carnesecca, and he had a sense of humor. He could poke fun at himself as well. Right. And he just was a marvelous coach. And people forget he was Bill Russell's backup back in the day with the Boston Celtics. So just an incredible impact on the game of basketball, and he will be missed.
He almost came to the Bulls. I read this somewhere along the line where before he decided to go into college coaching, there was a chance for him to come to the Bulls organization. I don't know if it was a head coach, but in some capacity, he had obviously a lot of cachet from, his days with the Celtics, but ultimately he decided to, do whatever he did elsewhere, and then ultimately he ended up at Georgetown.
Yeah, didn't everyone almost come to the Bulls?
Yes.
That's kind of in the story of the franchise. They lost the coin flip for Magic Johnson back in the day. We've talked about that in the past. It would have altered the landscape of the NBA.
Speaking of the Bulls, I mean, there's been some crazy, and I do mean crazy rumors, and they'll continue all the way up to draft night. As of this recording, and I think it's safe to say even for our probably next 2 or 3 recordings, they still don't have a head coach. So right. We'll see if or when, well, it'll be when, but it won't be if, it will be when they finally do get a head coach. But in the meantime, the rumors are galore, and right now the latest rumors are the Bulls in Portland hooking up on some kind of deal. So I will read you off one of the websites, and sometimes these are a dime a dozen. I'll let you anybody
can make up a trade.
Yeah, we'll make up a few even before this podcast is over, but I'll read them and you just give me your thoughts, okay? Trade number 1 with Portland. It's the Bulls trading Otto Porter Jr. Listen, I'm sure they'd love to get out from that $25 million, whatever it is. Lauri Markkanen, the number 4 pick, and a second-round pick in 2021.
We always trade a second-round pick.
Yes,
any deal.
What do they don't? They don't need those. They never do. Anyway, they get back from Portland C.J. McCollum, who I do like, by the way, and Portland's number 1 pick, which is 16 overall, and I do not like that trade.
Yeah,
that's too much.
It's going to be very difficult to find any team that's going to take Otto Porter Jr. even for one season at $28 million. I mean, he's a guy who's been hurt for most of his NBA career. He's not a guy that's going to be very much sought after by teams unless they're just trying to clear up a salary slot for free agency in 2021. That's where he may have some value down the road. C.J. McCollum is a very good player, but I think he got a lot of good looks because of the greatness of Damian Lillard.
Sure.
You put him on a team where he's one of the primary scorers. I think he's going to have some issues. No, that's not something I'd be too excited about.
Okay, neither would I. All right, here's the second scenario with Portland. If indeed the two franchises are trying to hook up on something, the Bulls get from Portland Rodney Hood, who they've talked about a lot of times, the previous administration in the past. In return, they give up Chandler Hutchinson and a second-round pick. Now, this trade really doesn't do anything for me either way. I don't care if they were to do this or not. Hood has been around in the NBA longer than Hutchinson has at this point. Hutchinson has had the injuries. He did have that dozen-game sort of breakout for him the middle of this past season. And again, the second-round pick, who cares?
And Hood's coming off an ACL tear, if I remember correctly. Yep. So, no, that's not very exciting. I mean, Hood was a guy coming out of Duke that was rumored as a possible Bulls pick in that draft, and he, when healthy, is a decent three-point shooter, but the phrase when healthy seems to apply to so many of these things, and that's why people get traded, is because they either can't stay healthy or they underachieve.
All right, here's the third scenario with Portland, and somebody's just decided they're going to just make up trades between the Bulls and Portland, as far as I'm concerned. The Bulls still looking to get C.J. McCollum, so he comes over from Portland. In return, going over there, Zach LaVine and Thaddeus Young. Now, economically, I don't even know if that trade could work. Could it?
I'm not sure what C.J. McCollum is making.
Well, he's got to be making somewhere in the vicinity of $20 million a year. Yeah, because Zach's making 19.
Yeah, 19, and Young is at 10 or 11, so you're looking at
25 then.
Right.
Sorry, I don't like that trade either.
No. And Zach LaVine is younger than C.J. McCollum, and I think really is a better player.
Yeah, so I don't know. That's like I said, some of these websites, they just make up things for the heck of it. All right, let's go back to the bubble for just a second. And
before we move on, though,
yes,
one
please.
thing we didn't mention that a name came available and then disappeared almost immediately. Nate McMillan. Who's a guy that I thought might be a really good fit in this Bulls situation. He's a guy that came from disciplined programs. He coached in Seattle. He coached with Portland. And then with the Indiana Pacers, and the Pacers made the playoffs all 4 years that he was there, overachieving. A lot of people knock him the fact they got eliminated in the first round in all 4 of those years, but McMillan was very definitive. He did interviews with a couple of the beat guys in Indianapolis and said, I'm going to take next season off. I need some time to just reevaluate where I feel about the league, and what he probably was saying, I'm getting paid anyway, so I might as well take the time off. So for a day, I thought maybe McMillan was a name that would fit because he's done really well with teams that he's gotten the most out of the talent on the roster, but he seems pretty set on not coaching next year. So, unless something changes, he's probably not a candidate.
All right, here's my only criticisms of Nate McMillan, and obviously he's been the coach of what? How many? 3 teams?
3 teams.
Okay. Yeah. His playoff record is not good. It's 17 and 36. And the other thing that I don't like, and this is more so as a fan, he does tend to play a slow down kind of offense. I don't think that really fits not only with the Bulls roster, but in general in today's NBA. Just take a look at what's going on in the bubble specifically. So in spite of his successes, that wouldn't be the guy that I'd be going for.
I think what's going to happen is they'll end up hiring an assistant coach.
Absolutely.
It'll work price-wise, and it kind of fits in with their whole rebuilding, new front office, young roster kind of philosophy. The problem is anybody can say, we're going to do what all the other teams do. We're going to play fast and we're going to shoot threes. And, sometimes you can fall into a trap that way, just trying to play like everybody else does. If your talent isn't conducive to that type of style, that's where I think coaching comes in. is that you have to look at who are the players on your roster, who are the guys that are long-term fits. Can we build an offense and defensive system that works with them? We've talked a lot already about Wendell Carter Jr., who's to this point has been a total enigma. He looked like a guy coming out of Duke who had a lot of offensive potential. He had a nice touch from 18 feet. You thought if he worked on his shot, he could become a threat from the three-point line, and he was so underused with the previous two coaches that, we don't even know who he is. He could turn out to be in a couple of years a very, very good NBA player, or it could be a whiff on a number 7 pick.
Something just tells me that whatever trade scenario ultimately comes down the road, if indeed they trade either the pick or they make some kind of trade, he's the guy who's going to go.
Right, because he's been very vocal about the fact that he feels like he's playing out of position as a 6'9" center, but that's the trend in the NBA. We said don't do what everybody else is doing, but the reality of it is if teams are throwing 4 guards and a power forward on the court, you got to match up to a certain degree. Now, if you have a dominant low post center, then you can force them to adjust. But right now, the trend is smaller centers like Wendell Carter Jr., like Daniel Gafford, who's 6'10". You're not looking at these 7', 7'2" centers as much anymore because teams want to go small. You look at some of the lineups that are out there in the bubble, even in playoff games, and you're seeing 4 guards out there and sometimes a small forward. It's almost insane how small the league is going.
And speaking of trades, there have been some other trade rumors, again, with Philadelphia and the Bulls. A couple of weeks ago was Ben Simmons. This past week, I read a bunch of trade rumors potentially with Joel Embiid coming here. First of all, that's not going to happen. Plus, Elton Brand has already gone on record as saying, you know what, he takes a lot of blame for what happened, but he also feels that these two players can ultimately mesh together, which so far in the NBA they have not, but he still believes that they can, and so I don't think either one of those two guys is going to get traded. That's my opinion.
Yeah, I heard Elton Brand's comments, but I feel like he's doing what any good executive is going to do.
He's lying.
He's trying to raise the price, and I agree with you. I don't think they'll trade Embiid. I think Embiid is a unique talent. He is a legitimate 7-footer who can score inside and out, who can block shots. Yep. The question to him is conditioning and motivation. Simmons, I think, is available.
Okay.
I think if you make the right offer, you get Ben Simmons.
I still, as talented as he is, it would scare me if he was on my franchise because he can't shoot free throws. Right. And that just scares the heck out of me. All right, before we get to Sarah, real quickly, Mark, in the bubble, the Eastern Conference, the second round between Toronto and Boston has already started, and Boston won the first game, ran away easily. And I didn't realize that they have beaten Toronto 4 out of the 5 matchups that they've played this season.
Yeah, I thought going into that series, Toronto would be a pretty solid favorite in that because they were very impressive since the league has restarted in Orlando. They play an excellent defensive system. Nick Nurse, coach of the year, is very good at making adjustments, and I'm sure he'll adjust from game 1 to game 2, but Boston's one of those teams, they're kind of a feast or famine from 3. When they're knocking down threes, they are awfully tough to beat. They're one of those teams that go small. They have Daniel Tice, who plays center, but sometimes, they had Shemi Ojale playing center off the bench at like 6'7", 6'8", and just surrounded by a bunch of wing players. Another guy who's playing really well for them is Marcus Smart, who was a guy that couldn't shoot at all his first few years in the league, and people talk about, well, can you improve your shooting? He's an example of, yes, you can. And, we've talked about the draft and some of the guys available that don't shoot it as well. Don't think because a kid at 18, 19 isn't a great shooter that he can't improve on that.
Sure.
Stuff.
Well, Boston playing without Gordon Hayward, and I don't know. Yeah. I don't know when he's going to come back, if he's even going to be able to come back. And yet they won game 1 easily. That really surprised me. Now, the other Eastern Conference second round series.
I still like Toronto in the series, by the way.
I do too. I just think ultimately the better team, especially if Hayward is not going to be available, will win. And I think the same thing. Well, I know how you feel. You already said that you had Miami beating Milwaukee in the round 2, even before round 1 opened.
And it pains me to say it.
I disagree with you, though.
I've been very vocal on this. I'm a Milwaukee born and bred guy. I rooted for the Bucks when I was in 8th grade when they won the championship in 1971. I went to the airport. I got Oscar Robertson's autograph when they came off the team charter.
That's worth something, by the way.
Yeah, so actually he just wrote Big O. So
that's worth something, too.
I don't know if I can validate that that's actually Oscar Robertson, but
could be Otis Wilson.
Some friends of mine and I, we got one of the moms to drive us down, and we waited at the airport and, greeted the champions back from Baltimore. But anyway, that's I got off the path there. But what I've seen of Milwaukee in since the restart has began, and even in the series against Orlando, that defensive system doesn't work. They pack in the paint, they let you shoot threes, Miami is going to kill them from the three-point line. Duncan Robinson, who was, we talked about him in the past, a guy that started out Division II and was a off-the-bench player at Michigan, wasn't drafted. He's become a huge threat with his ability to shoot the three. Tyler Hero, a rookie out of Kentucky, can really shoot the three ball as well. Goran Dragic is now in the starting lineup. He is a veteran who can score, and even Jimmy Butler at times will get hot from the three-point line. So the matchup's not great for them, and they're going to have problems keeping Bam Adebayo off the offensive glass too, because even though Brook Lopez has had a really good year, he is slow-footed, and I think Bam is going to really hurt him.
Well, Butler's health, of course, is a key going into this series. He got injured, I think, in the last game of the previous series against Indiana, so I don't know exactly. I'm sure he'll play, but what his effectiveness will be, that's a whole other story. Milwaukee, they stumbled badly in Game 1 against Orlando, and then even at other times after winning the next 4 games, they did struggle, but I think they righted their ship enough, at least mentally, that they feel like they're, if not all the way back to where they were, let's say 2 or 3 months ago, or longer than that. I think they probably have their confidence back amongst themselves. That's just a guess on my part. So I still have them winning that series.
Well, I hope they do.
I know you do, and it's okay to be jaded. Listen, I get it. I will say this. When you talk about Milwaukee, Miami, Toronto, and Boston, the common denominator, really good coaches across the board.
Yeah, there's no question about that. All of them being considered for Coach of the Year honors. I've always been a big fan of Eric Spoelstra. I think he does a great job with the talent, because they really have not had great rosters up until this year when they added Jimmy, and Adebayo really emerged as one of the most improved players in the league. But I think with Budenholzer, sometimes he tries to play too many guys, and he gets into trouble with that. Like, they'll throw Kyle Korver out there, and then, he's not making a shot. They got to get him out of there. I noticed Ersan Ilyasova sat for a couple of games, then he played him in Game 5. He's trying to figure out which matchups are going to work, and sometimes what happens is, if you try to play 10, 11, 12 guys,
that's a good point.
Nobody really gets in a rhythm. And I would imagine in the first game, maybe the first 2 games of this upcoming series, he's going to try to experiment off his bench, which guys can give him something. And, DiVincenzo's been shaky. I'm not a Bledsoe fan. We'll see. It'll be a fascinating matchup because, as you mentioned, you do have good coaches. You do have teams with some depth. And, Kendrick Nunn's coming off the bench now because he had been away from the bubble for a while. It's going to be fascinating to see how these two coaches try to get the best possible matchups that can help them, and when teams go to their bench.
All right, back to the West quickly. Game 7, is it tonight or is it tomorrow? No, it's tomorrow night between Denver and Utah.
Right,
tonight is Game 6 between Houston and Oklahoma City. I think Houston will win that game, and then they go up against the Clippers, and that'll be an interesting series.
No, they play the Lakers.
They do. Oh, I'm sorry. Houston does play the Lakers. It's the Denver-Utah. That's right. You're right. Denver-Utah winner goes against the Clippers. These are all interesting stuff.
Yeah, I mean, Houston plays that unique style. Again, they go ultra small with PJ Tucker as the tallest player on the court. We've talked about that in the past, and that's the team that plays a small forward and 4 guards out there. I don't give them much of a chance against the Lakers. They might get a game, but I'd say that's about it. And the Clippers against the winner of Denver-Utah, I think that's something that the Clippers will be able to handle fairly easily. I really don't know how to handicap Game 7 between Denver and Utah. Obviously, Utah jumped out to a 3-1 lead, and Jamal Murray's almost single-handedly won the last 2. We'll see whether Murray or Donovan Mitchell comes up with the heroic effort in Game 7, but I think ultimately they will lose to the Clippers, maybe getting a game or 2.
Well, first of all, really with the Clippers, and the one thing, this is no revelation, Kawhi Leonard is a winning basketball player. I mean, he just, at the highest level, he just figures out a way of affecting games for his team to win. I mean, that's what he is. He's a winner. He's not the flashiest of all players. He's just an effective player who will do almost anything to help his team win a game. So I totally respect that. As far as Denver and Utah, I picked Denver to win that series originally. One of the reasons I picked it was because Michael Conley missed the first couple of games. That didn't seem to bother Utah that much. And now he's come back and played well. So, you know what? That'll be a really, really interesting Game 7. As good as this podcast has been, Mark, I know it's going to be raised 3 levels because we have the one, the only, she's pretty on top of everything else, Sarah Kustok, coming up in just a moment. So let's take a break. We'll be back right after this.
I said, who can I get to break down the White Sox and a very good performance of late and talk about where this club may be headed? Then my next guest. He's a Hall of Famer. He's been with us before. It's my buddy, my friend, Hawk Harrelson. How are you, Hawk?
All right, big guy. What are we going to argue about today?
Nothing. We don't have nothing to argue about today.
It's the Mike North Advantage, only on the Barroom Network.
And welcome back to the podcast. And as mentioned, Mark, we have a very, very special guest. And we don't blow smoke when we do this, but I will just simply say, and I know you certainly agree with this, Sarah Kustok is one of the nicest people anybody will ever hope to meet in their lifetime. And I know she's listening to this and she's saying, no, that's not true. But it is true, Sarah. There is nobody who doesn't love you. And we're proud and pleased to be joined by Sarah Kustok. And you can follow her, of course, as many of us do, on Twitter at Sarah Kustok. And Mark, I'll let you do even a further introduction.
Well, I'll tell you, I've met a lot of people in broadcasting, and, this is an ego-driven profession, but yeah. Sarah doesn't have an ounce of ego, and she's had so much success in her career. She's such a wonderful person, and I can't tell you how many times you show up at the United Center or at a baseball park, and people will ask you, even though Sarah's been gone for a number of years now, how's Sarah Kustok doing? Everyone wants to know how you're doing, and everyone is so happy for your success because, as I mentioned, this is an ego-driven profession, and at times people can be jealous of other people's success, but I mean this 100%. Everyone that I met is so happy for you and so proud of the success that you've enjoyed and all the things you've accomplished. I mean, you're doing everything. You're doing the Brooklyn Nets on Yes. You're doing a number of things for Fox Sports. I've seen you do NFL sidelines. You're doing men's and women's college basketball. You're doing studio shows. You've just done it all. What kind of whirlwind has this been like for you, Sarah?
You guys are making me blush. I didn't know I was going to get this introduction, or else I might not have joined. But I first want to say those words mean everything to me, and I say this from the bottom of my heart. I am so grateful for the two of you, for Chicago. There is not a day that goes by with all that I do in my career, and also just personally, that I think about the friends you both are, how much you helped me early on, how much you still help me now. I get so excited when I now still get to come back and see you both at United Center. With David, I think about all the times, with White Sox games, whatnot. Mark, you just such a crucial part in my growth and development and learning in this industry. So I want to say to both of you from the bottom of my heart, thank you, and just the city of Chicago and everything that goes along with it means the world to me. So I will say that. And to answer your question, Mark, it's been such a journey and a fun experience. And I think with all things, so much of my reason for getting into this business is because I am just so passionate about sports. And obviously, so much has transpired over the course of the last few months for everyone around the world and in our country. But the opportunity to call sports and to cover sports and to be inspired by the individuals that we get to watch on a daily basis. I think I'm so thankful for that, and it pushes me to grow, and it pushes me to learn, and it challenges me. And I think more than anything, that's what I appreciate most about all of it.
Well, Sarah, they can always say this about you and many people like yourself, that they can take the girl out of Chicago, but they can't take Chicago out of the girl. And you will always be a Chicagoan through and through.
Yes.
And God bless you for that. I'm just and on top of everything else that we've thrown the accolades, you actually even make Ian Eagle better, if that's possible, and part of the broadcast.
Bird, he's very good.
I don't know if anyone needs to do that, but you guys, and that's been such a joy throughout the course of my career with all things. It's the people you get an opportunity to work with, and I think when you enjoy the people, and as I did at NBC Sports Chicago, formerly Comcast Sportsnet, and just all the different stops, when you really love and feel like it's you're working with friends and you're working with family, it makes it so much more enjoyable. And I think that resonates with the viewers, with listeners, because they know how much you care about the job that you do, but also about the people that you're working with.
Well, what a lot of people don't realize is that Ian Eagle actually has a very good, he's a very funny guy, and the two of you have great chemistry, and I know personally because I've sat, right between the two of you during some of those broadcasts. But what was it like doing some of these broadcasts recently for the games that were in the bubble? Because you weren't in the bubble. What was that like?
Bizarre. It was one of the most unique experiences. I think we all, have these unique experiences in sports broadcasting that you think, man, I'll never have something top that. And it was so it was something that made you really think about, the nuances of your job, the details of what you do. And David, as you said, so Ian Eagle was in the bubble because he was calling some of those seeding games for Turner, for TNT. And I was at Barclays Center because we were calling through the, with the local broadcast and with the team broadcast, we're all calling them remotely. So I called a few games with Ryan Rucco, but we still were going to have Ian call some games. So we had each other on FaceTime, which I don't know if that actually helped because there was delays hearing each other. There was delays, obviously, when you're looking at the picture of someone, but I had them front next to me just in case there was those facial cues that you naturally, when you're looking at one another during the course of a broadcast. And then add in the fact that you're calling the game off the monitor. He was doing so while inside the arena. But it's one of those things where you rely on chemistry, you make the best of it. I think we've gotten accustomed to each other's cadence and rhythm and the calls he's going to make and kind of where we slide in throughout the course of a broadcast and calling a game. So I think so much of it was predicated. I think our bosses decided to do that because they knew that we had a basis of a chemistry where we were used to the rhythm of working with each other. It was fun, but it was something that I hope we don't have to do again. I'll say that.
Sarah, I believe you were the first full-time female analyst for an NBA broadcast team, if not the first, one of the first. Did you feel any extra pressure as you started the job, feeling like not only do I want to do this to do well for myself, but I'm really representing, all women in terms of getting opportunities, because there are a lot of women now getting better opportunities around the league because of the great job you've done?
Well, Mark, thank you, and I love seeing that. And I think more than anything, there was a responsibility because you understood. I've said this a million times, and I'll say it a million more. When you look at people like Doris Burke, like Ann Myers Drysdale, you could look at the great work that, Beth Mowins has done with the NFL and in football and, just different sports in different areas. But specifically, myself thinking about those had gone before and me getting that opportunity, knowing that there was a responsibility to be good enough, to be confident enough, and to make sure the job you did afforded that same opportunity for those behind you. So I think, with everything that I try to do throughout the course of my career, you're always thinking about that next generation. You're always thinking the work you do, the words you say, just the example that you set may impact those around you and those that follow you, and especially young girls and young boys, and the opportunity to, not look at someone based off of, there's a woman in a role that normally we see a male in that role. And so that was extremely important to me. And for as much as those I worked with knew I wanted to I wanted to do the job, and I wanted to either, have people like me or not like me, or, compliment or criticize me based on whatever they thought of me, and not so much me being a female in that role. But it was very, very important to me, just that aspect. And I am thrilled to see so many more individuals and females getting an opportunity to call games or to be in different roles that I think maybe we had not seen them in before.
Yeah, and for people who don't know, Sarah was a heck of a basketball player at Sandburg High School, and at DePaul had a wonderful career. So no one's going to question your credentials as a hoopster and knowing the game. Did you ever find any resistance from your viewing audience? I know people can be very cruel on social media at times. I don't know if you try to avoid that kind of thing. But was that a hurdle that you felt like you had to clear to prove that I can stack up my basketball knowledge and my past experiences with any man who might be possibly doing this job around the league?
I think I'll say two things to that, which I know you two are probably very familiar with. Don't read the comments.
Right. Always good advice.
And as listen to what your bosses have to say. I listened to so many, whether it was the coaches, the Brooklyn Nets coaches, whether it was other coaches who watch stuff and I'd have conversation with, or, in their roles of scouting, would listen to the broadcast and have feedback, have thoughts, whether it's players, whether it's other, colleagues or individuals that I respect and I value their opinion. I think a lot of it, though, just in terms of generally speaking, you're never going to make it in this business if you don't have a thick skin, and you are never going to make it in this business if you think that everyone's going to think that you are the best. That's just not the way it works. And so for me, it was less about that and more about I just wanted to make sure I was as ultimately prepared as possible. And when it came to the research, when it came to watching film, when it came to knowing the teams, knowing the opponents, just continuing to watch games back and look at ways and areas that I can get better. As I said, talking to all those different individuals and, how can I get better and what areas can I improve on? And just that in it of itself to me was just important. I think, for many of us will say this, but I'm certainly my own worst critic of where, the things I think and the areas where I know I can improve, I am probably toughest on myself. So my focus was just about making sure that the job I did was one where whatever was going to happen, but that I was prepared as possible. And I think so much of what I focus on, I don't mean to be so long-winded for you guys, but I have said this a lot when people I think different things motivate people, or whether it's those that, they look at those who doubt them or who may be critical and it helps to prove them wrong. And Mike Conley Jr. had a tremendous quote, this probably 4 or 5 years ago, where he had said, "It's not on my agenda to prove those who don't believe in me wrong. It is on my agenda to prove those who do believe in me right." And I think about that all the time because I think about the people that had taken risks on me, or whether it's those who gave me this opportunity to put me in this position in the first place because they believed I was the best person for this role or for this job. And so that's, to me, that was my focus, and that was what I wanted to make sure to keep my eyesight on, keep my vision on, keep, what motivated you to continue to improve. And, I'll make sure that it stays that way.
Hey, Sarah, in your capacity with the Nets, obviously you came to know Kenny Atkinson, I'm sure, fairly well. A couple of questions. Why? Because it's still puzzling to me. Why was he let go by the Nets? Was it a personality conflict or what? And, I'm sure you've seen the rumors that he's at least in the running for possible Bulls new head coach. What are your thoughts on the whole thing?
Yeah, I'll say in terms of with the departure from the Nets, I think there's a lot of layers to it, a lot to unpack. There's, a lot that I think has been both publicly reported and also just things that happen behind the scenes. And I think, as you all know, with every organization and franchise, there's always so much that goes into it. And I think it just ultimately was decided that he was not the person and not the right fit to move forward with, as they headed into next season and the timing of it. And I think there was many discussions, but I think it's more than just one reason or one person or one factor into it. And in looking at who might be the next team, next organization that would potentially hire Kenny Atkinson, I do not have enough good things and positive words to just advocate and promote what a excellent head coach I believe he is. And I'm sure for all of you who've continued to look at different things, I know his name has been tossed around in a lot of different positions, especially with Chicago Bulls, which, I know there's so many great candidates out there. The thing I'll say about Kenny, I think he's known as a development guy, which the players and the improvements speak for themselves. And I think that's an area where he is so extraordinary, not only in actual, when you look at on the floor development of players in terms of their skill set in refining what they are. And there's so many players on the Bulls is again, you guys can speak so much more to this, but that have so much upside and so much to be excited about with that roster. And I was excited. I was hoping they would keep moving up, but that number 4 pick, I think it was great to see, and a lot of opportunity and just optimism that should be around there. But what I saw was, when he took that job, just his ability to motivate, his ability to, throughout the course of, after those first few years and so much development with a young team and different pieces, but just the way I saw him develop as an actual head coach, in-game coaching, what he was doing, whether it was rotations, whether it was play calling, whether it was, side out of bounds plays. You started to see just the execution level in the way that I think so often we look at someone, and I think he's been labeled as a development guy, which he is extraordinary at that. But the thing I'll say is I think he's so much more than that. And he just brings so many great attributes to the table that I think he, to me, is just going to be a extraordinary hire, regardless of where he lands.
One of the things that Arturas Karnisovas said when he took over as head of basketball operations is that he wants a coach that is going to be, number one, an expert in player development, and you just talked about the fact that he's excellent in that regard, and two, is one who can foster great one-on-one relationships with the players, because he said he wants to make this a player-friendly franchise. Obviously, there was a lot of publicity with Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving signing on with the Nets, and a lot of speculation that maybe they wanted to have their own coach in there. Did Kenny kind of get caught in the eye of the hurricane there, or was this just a situation where two parties were growing apart and they were better off going with a different coach?
I think that's a great question, Mark. And I think I think there's probably a lot of factors you could look at that. The thing I'll say that many have said is probably if Kevin and Kyrie, absolutely definitely wanted Kenny to be the coach, he'd probably still be there, but I don't think it's fair to put it on them, and I don't think that it is the case to put it on them. I think there's a multitude of factors, and I don't think the decision was made for or because, and definitely not mandated by Kevin and Kyrie. And what I will say about Kenny, and this is more based on the entirety of his, 3.5 to 3+ years with the Nets, is just the relationships that he did form with so many of the players and so many of the top players. And I think he understood, and as he continued to progress and being a head coach, just learning about the communication factor of that. And I think the one thing you'll say about Kenny, he's up at like 4 a.m. watching film, riding his bike. He's someone who just, it goes back to what he was as a player, when he was playing in Europe and overseas. It goes back to, who he's been. And that's why I think he is so good with player development, just the amount of hours and time and heart he pours into it. But I think if when you look at those two qualities, and I know AK has, I'm so excited about him and about Mark Eversley and just everything that they're putting together. But I think those are there when it comes to Kenny Atkinson. I mean, I think he's got those type of things. And again, I'll say though, I think there's a multitude of some candidates out there. It's just the understanding of knowing this guy has been there, he's done it, he's still growing. But he does have the experience that comes along with it.
Hey, Sarah, when you talk about the Nets, obviously, and a lot has been invested literally, financially, in both Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving. I mean, that's where you start. You got two superstars, two of the 10 best players on the planet right there, maybe even higher than top 10. And then you add, obviously, Karis LeVert had a breakout season. Spencer Dinwiddie has been really, coming on the last couple of years. DeAndre Jordan, his veteran presence in the middle, yada, yada, yada. What is the future for the Nets? And obviously a lot of it hinges on Kevin Durant coming back 100%, but what is the outlook for, and then what else do they need to add, if anything, going forward?
Yeah, I think that's such an interesting thing to look at because, by all accounts, Kevin Durant, in, again, the uncertainty of when next season will start or what will happen. But Kevin Durant and Kyrie have been playing, and they are healthy now, and their expectation is to be fully healthy for next year. I think you never know, especially with Kevin and injury like an Achilles, just, what type of time it's going to take to round back into form. But I think just given his game, his skill set, his size, all the things that go along with making him one of the greats is the reason why there's so much optimism that he will come back close to, or, if not the Kevin Durant as we know him to be. But I think, the Nets have title contending goals. I mean, I think they believe that with those two players surrounded by a lot of the great core that they have now, that they believe that should be, the next step of what their pursuits are. And, this offseason is going to be interesting to see what they do. Joe Harris is a free agent, and the Nets do have his bird rights, but he is such to me, the GM Sean Marks said he is priority number one. And in that, to me, I couldn't agree with more, just because with two players like Kevin and Kyrie, the knockdown shooter that Joe is, the ability to be such a low usage player, but ultimately productive and there to relieve and take so much gravity just with his ability to shoot, but also how much he's added to his game. And then I think they're going to, it's going to be interesting. There's been talk about who's the third star, and Karis LeVert really emerged now that he was healthy in the play in Orlando and in the bubble. How Spencer Dinwiddie fits into that mix, and just will they look to make a trade? So I'm not sure. I don't know if they need anything. I mean, I think with the players they have around Kevin and Kyrie, they seem like they fill a lot of gaps and a lot of pieces, and considering the fact the team has not been together, it's tough to gauge. But I do think there is opportunity for them to make some moves if they want to. So it'll be interesting to see.
Well, I'm going to say this because Sarah's too nice and she would never say it, but any team that has Kyrie Irving on it, watch out, because you got to worry about chemistry issues there. Everywhere he's been, there have been some problems, and we'll see if he and KD can coexist and be nice and treat their teammates with respect. I mean, that's going to be one of the fascinating stories in the NBA. But hey, enough basketball. People want to know more about Sarah. Sarah, what's next for you? Are you going to be spending your off season, not that you really have one, in New York? Will we see you in Chicago? What kind of long-term goals are out there for Sarah Kustok?
That's Mark. I don't know what can we do in this COVID world is what I'm still trying to figure out. But even if it's getting in a car, I definitely will get back to Chicago very soon. As you know, I have my brother and sister-in-law. I have 5 nieces and nephews who all the FaceTiming and the Zoom is it hasn't been enough, and I'm dying to get back to see them.
And that is Zach Kustok, the former Northwestern quarterback, in case our listeners don't know. But yeah, I mean, obviously, big family, and that keeps you busy as an aunt, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. It does. So hopefully get back to do that. And otherwise, probably be in New York again. I'm not sure. I'm not sure what exactly, what things will look like in these coming months. Just kind of taking it day by day. So we'll see, Mark. But Chicago definitely is on the docket. And Kendall Gill Kendall Gill had been calling me out and hounding me to do his 60-40 workout. So I finally completed that.
He's become quite the taskmaster, hasn't he? He's taken this head coach thing too seriously. He's acting like Bob Knight out there during these workouts.
I know. I'm like, when I'm getting yelled at, I'm like, this. I'm past this. I'm too old for this. People know. So it's been fun, but Mark, really, I think just with everything going on in the country and in the world and everything, just appreciating my health and holding on to my happiness and just kind of seeing how things play out.
Hey, Sarah, speaking of health, do you still play hoops? I mean, I always ask this question I asked John Paxson this years ago, and he said he hadn't picked up a basketball in 10 years, which blew me away because he was an NBA great player. So I'm just curious, do you play? And if you do, if you ever play against Eagle, you can certainly post him. That little I know.
Yeah, and he would admit to that. I can't hold a candle to his comedy. But when it comes to the basketball court, I still try and play some. Good. There's a group, that gets together. It's in this practice facility that we used to play quite a bit, and still try and play. I will tell you though, I feel like my days of it got to the point where I was slowing down, but you're smarter, you can figure the game out better. You just want to get a good run in. The shot always is still there, right. But my handles are definitely rusty. And now that all of my quickness is pretty much gone, I feel like I add a bit of uselessness. So I either need to downgrade the people I'm playing with, or at some point I may have to start hanging it out. But I'm still trying, David. I'm still trying.
That's
I hope
good.
Both of you are too.
Oh, of course.
Yeah, she's sandbagging everybody. She plays some pickup games and she just kills people regularly. So I don't know this isn't golf. We're not going to give you strokes on the course or something. I mean, come on now.
Golf is a game I got a lot of work. I got a lot of work to do. Golf, I haven't quite spent enough time yet.
Yeah, don't get in a shooting contest with Sarah Kustok. That's not a good thing. But Sarah, it's been so great to catch up with you. When you're in Chicago, David and I want to get on your calendar for a lunch date, okay? When it's safe to go out.
I am in for that. And if you ever need me back in the podcast again, Always. This is such an honor. It's been so wonderful talking with both of you.
You're the ultimate sweetheart. We love you dearly, and we hope to see you soon, and we certainly will take you up on that offer to have you on again sometime down the road.
Sarah, be well.
Thanks, guys.
We love you, and everybody in Chicago misses you.
Love all of you.
What's the best way to not miss a single episode of Sharpshooters with Schanowski and Schuster? Well, subscribe to the Bears Barroom Radio Network wherever you get your podcasts. Just go to Google and search Bears Barroom Radio Network, and you'll see a list of delivery channels like iTunes, Podbean, Spotify, and just subscribe to Bears Barroom Radio Network. You won't miss a single episode.
And welcome back to the podcast. I'm David Schuster. He's Mark Schanowski. God, I love talking to Sarah, don't you?
You know, it's funny. I worked with her for a number of years when it was Comcast Sportsnet, and her desk was just too down for me. And
lucky you.
Yeah, and we did some shows together. And she mentioned that she was always her own harshest critic, and she would come up after show and she said, well, what do you think I need to do to get better? And did I do this right? Or she wanted to be really good, and she look at what success she's been able to achieve. I mean, some people that come into the business just feel like they're entitled to certain things, and they can get by on their looks or connections or whatever. But Sarah always wanted to be better, and you can see it now working with the great Iron Eagle. She wants to make sure that their tandem is functioning at 100% efficiency, and they are. They're one of the best watches in the NBA.
Iron Eagle, I've known him for a long time, and I've done stats for him through different color commentators. Sarah and him, they just work so perfectly, like a hand in a glove. They just work so well together. Ian is very funny. He's got a great sense of humor. Sarah also has a great sense of humor, and it's just a well-oiled broadcasting machine, if you will.
Yeah, we're just so happy for her. As I mentioned, she's doing so many things for Fox Sports, and she's so versatile, and they can rely on her to do any number of things. And I asked her about career goals. I guess I didn't have to, because she's really doing it all right now. It's just a question of what she wants to do professionally in the future. And we wish her all the best, and we really appreciate her having her on.
Absolutely. All right, let's go back to the bubble just for a couple of seconds, because there's a couple of things that have come out of there that were very interesting. First of all, Paul George, he was in a shooting slump for a while.
Yeah.
And I guess I shouldn't be surprised by this, but, it sort of raised my eyebrows a little bit when he talked about one of the reasons why he was having a tough time in the bubble is because he and other players, because of the isolation, they were fighting sort of a depression being in there. And I guess you can equate it like sometimes they talk about astronauts or whatever going to Mars or something like that, and they're going to be cooped up in some kind of rocket ship or whatever for like 9 months or a year or whatever it takes to get to Mars. And they say that you worry about the emotional being of a person, and I guess being in this bubble, it's not exactly the same thing, but I guess it affects people differently, I guess.
Well, we've heard different accounts coming out of the meetings that were held last week when it all started with Milwaukee deciding not to play in their Game 5 against Orlando. I believe it was Wednesday afternoon. And then there were a series of meetings where we were hearing reports late Wednesday night that they may pull the plug on the entire season. And I think that, what you just mentioned, played a big part in it. Now, families are able to join teams now for the second round of the playoffs, which should help bring some degree of normalcy to some of the players. But as you mentioned, players are feeling isolated. They're feeling lonely. They were seeing what was going on around them in the world, and they're like, well, I'm locked away, and there's nothing I can do. And we've heard reports of players yelling at each other, of Patrick Beverley getting into it with Michelle Roberts, the Players Association president. And guys were probably vocalizing the fact that you basically locked us away. We can't go anywhere. And now we can't have an impact on what's going on in our communities out there. So I think there probably was a sentiment that, forget it. Why should we even worry about staying here for another month and a half to decide a champion when ultimately the season is always going to be looked on as tainted anyway?
Well, it's very interesting. Also interesting, Carmelo Anthony, who's, sort of been like a vagabond in his own, even though an incredibly talented player. He started in Denver, went to New York. There's rumors that he was going to come to Chicago once upon a time, ended up in Portland, almost like an afterthought out in Portland. And then he had a pretty good season in a Trailblazer uniform. And finally, he is saying he thinks he found a home.
Yeah, he wants to come back next season.
And I get it. Listen, Portland's a pretty nice place to play. On top of it, the fan base is very, very loyal to those players, and it's a good area. And he fits in to that franchise. I mean, there's not that much pressure on him as long as you got those two guys in the backcourt. I mean, that's where the pressure is going to be from the defense. So, he could probably prosper out there. I guess, even though he's well financially compensated, good for him that he feels like he's finally found his home.
Yeah, but if they make one of those crazy trades you talked about in that first segment, maybe he won't want to be there anymore.
That's true, too. Did you see this one, Marcus? I'm still laughing about this one. I laughed about it when I saw it, and I'm still laughing about it. Did you see why George Hill missed the national anthem?
No, I didn't catch that one.
Oh, my God. This is great. All right. You might laugh at this, too. George Hill missed the national anthem. This is the first game after they had, I want to call it a boycott, but they missed a couple of games because of what was going on, the NBA players making a statement, whatever. So he wasn't there for the game against Orlando in the national anthem. And so a lot of the reporters queried him, like, why did you miss it? I mean, is this another statement? And he goes, no. And you guys obviously have not been watching me all season. I have a pregame ritual, and I'm not going to even, this is a podcast, so I can say whatever I want here. He goes, I have a pregame ritual where I take a dump right before the opening tip, and I was in there doing my thing. So that's why he missed the national anthem, and he was deadly serious. It's a pregame ritual. Well, first of all, how do you train your system to take a dump?
You talk about being regular. That's
Yes.
That's something. But yeah, because George Hill was one of the most vocal players saying, why are we even here? Why should we even be here when there's so many things going on around the world? But yeah, so people thought he was making a statement. Nope. He just had to take care of his ritual.
Yeah, well, you talk about regular. I wish I was that regular. I'm not. I'm irregular. All right, the last thing. I wanted to do this last week, but we ran out of time. So we'll do this real quickly. The name of this podcast is called Sharpshooters. And so I was just thinking, who are the all-time sharpshooters in the NBA or even college basketball? And even when I think of college basketball, I went to school, and he played a little bit in the NBA. Mike Glenn from Southern Illinois. I mean, he had the prettiest jump shot I think I've ever seen by anybody. And he was a damn good shooter. His pro career was very, very limited, but he was a hell of a college player. Anyway, so I put together my list of the greatest, what I consider sharp shooters at the respective positions. Point guard, obviously, you got to start with Steph Curry. I mean,
yeah, he may be the greatest shooter of all time. His range is unlimited, hit big shots in big games. Yeah, I think you look around the history of basketball, I'm trying to come up with somebody that's even close. I mean, at that position, at the point guard
numbers
position,
wise, you won't find anybody.
Right.
52 from just overall from the field, 44 from three.
Damian Lillard comes to mind, but whether you consider him a pure point is another thing. But he does play the point guard spot.
The closest I could come, honestly, back in his heyday. Well, there's a couple. They played against each other. Steve Nash and Price, Mark Price.
Mark Price was an excellent shooter.
They were excellent shooters, and usually they the same thing at the free throw line. I mean, they're both 90% free throw shooters at least.
Right. Isaiah Thomas is a great scorer, but not necessarily a great long range shooter.
It's Isaiah Thomas is a whole nother subject sometime. When I think of the greatest players, I mean, he's on my list of greatest players. He's the best high school player I ever saw because he was a pro in 8th grade. He honestly could have played in the NBA, I feel, when he was in 8th grade. I saw him play in an 8th grade, whatever it was, tournament or something like that. I thought he was good enough to play in the pros right then and there.
Another name from the name from the past, Jerry West.
Jerry West. Yeah, absolutely. All right, so shooting guards, and actually Jerry West I consider more a shooting guard overall, and he was my second. Ray Allen, I think, is probably the greatest sharpshooter, if you want to call it that, at the shooting guard position.
You talk about a pretty shot. I mean, if young people want to watch how to shoot from long range, it's so effortless. I mean, the shot he made to win that second championship for the Miami Heat was unbelievable, going backwards and just knowing exactly where he was on that short corner to knock down that three. One of the biggest clutch shots of all time. So, people talk about Reggie Miller and guys like that. But, yeah, I think Klay Thompson certainly belongs in that category. He has a textbook jumper. And boy, 37 points in a quarter. We saw him hit 14 threes against the Bulls.
Right in front of me. Right in front of me. Oh, my God. Golden State had some incredible games against the Bulls at the United Center. That was one of them.
Were they going under the screens that night?
Yes. all game long. And you know what? It's funny because players or coaching staffs or PR departments, probably even more than anybody, they're conscious of what's going on in games, okay? So they knew he was on the cusp of an all-time record, and they kept him in the game to get the damn record, if you remember. And they were egging him on, shoot. And sure enough, they weren't guarding him, and he got the record.
Another name that goes back, Pistol Pete Maravich.
Oh, my God.
I don't know if you consider him a point guard or a shooting guard. Just an incredible scorer. We talked about the fact that he averaged,
especially in college,
44 points a game at LSU without the three-point shot, and he had range out to the midcourt line. So he was one of the great shooters of all time.
One of my favorite players of all time, just an absolute magician, rather. He might have played the piano too. I have no idea. Small forward. I mean, it starts and ends with Larry Bird.
Larry Bird. I always like watching classic games, and during that period, during the pandemic, when there was no live sports on, there were so many of those Celtics-Lakers games that you would see rebroadcast, and the things that he did were just so amazing, and the fact that he came out for a three-point contest wearing his warm-up jacket and going, the rest of you guys just playing for second. I'm not even taking my warm-up off.
He was something else. Listen, I was introduced to Larry Bird even before he got to, the final game against Magic Johnson, whatever year that was, because I saw him, I went to Southern Illinois, he was at Indiana State, and he would come in and just kill the Salukis. They didn't have a three-point shot back in college back in those days. He would be hitting 35-footers like Bozo Circus, dropping it into bucket number one. He was so automatic. I mean, it was just a treat. And yes, I mean, Larry Bird, we could talk hours about him as well, but he's my sharpshooter. There have been other great small forwards. I mean, Glenn Rice is another one who was just automatic when he was on. Kevin Durant, he's a 7-foot small forward, but Kevin Durant is also, when he gets going, is a sharpshooter. Absolutely. Power forward, I think it starts for me, Dirk Nowitzki. As far as from the outside, I mean, he is the original stretch four.
He reinvented the formula, the stretch four, the ability to knock down shots from long distance. And, of course, he basically carried Dallas to that championship, beating the Heat in 2011. Just one of the most remarkable individual accomplishments for a team that was just okay on paper, and they beat the big three. It was pretty remarkable. I'm trying to think of other great power forward shooters, but, back in the day, it was more those guys would go in the block and try to score inside. But, yeah, he's the guy that kind of revolutionized that whole thing, and now every team wants to have one.
You know who was a really good sharpshooter, if you will, from the power forward position? I mean, there's the stretch four has become a big thing in the NBA. I mean, Niko Mirotic, once upon a time, who, when he was on his game, was a pretty good sharpshooter himself, but not consistently enough. But there's another guy, Davis Bertans. He's really good, and he's going to make himself a lot of money very shortly.
Yeah, he's a free agent coming up, and Washington's going to have to open the bank to try to keep him.
All right, from the center position, I had to think really hard about this. There were not really
many.
My
guy Jack Sikma.
Jack Sikma from Illinois Wesleyan, yes.
Yeah, I mean, he didn't necessarily go out to the three-point line. He was more top of the key kind of a guy. But, yeah, he was able to step out and knock down that long-range shot. But now just about everybody thinks they can shoot the three. Karl Anthony Towns almost makes a living trying to shoot, 5-6 threes a game. Almost every center now is expected to be able to have range out to the three-point line.
Karl Anthony Towns, of current players, is the one that I look at the most, who's got that outside shot. I mean, Embiid can do it as well. That's why I think they're the two best.
Remember Alvin Adams from the Phoenix Suns?
Oh, my God, yeah.
He's the guy that would shoot from long distance.
Well, going back in time, Brad Miller, who played a short time for the Bulls. I mean, when he would go out to the outside, he actually could be pretty automatic himself. Arvydas Sabonis was also very good, especially tail end of his career when he didn't have the mobility like he did early on in his career. He would go outside. And here's another guy who's not, you don't think of as a center, but a lot of times, especially out in Phoenix, they would play him at the 5. Channing Frye was also a very good shooter from the outside.
Yeah, we should mention some guys that were part-time players for the Bulls who had a lot of success. Craig Hodges, obviously, was won 2 or 3 long-distance shootouts.
I think he won 3, if I'm not mistaken.
Kyle Korver, considered one of the great shooting specialists, and Steve Kerr, who will always remembered for the shot to win the championship. But he, I believe, still is the number 1 shooter in career three-point percentage.
Yeah, 45%, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, and Steve's one of our favorites, too, so shout out to Steve Kerr.
Absolutely. Well, you're one of my favorites, Mark.
Well, we had Sarah on, so we broke the bank today. I don't know if we can.
I don't know how you're going to top that, Mark. But I'm sure you'll try and figure out a way. Hey, folks, it's been fun as always.
I was going to say, if there's never a more natural close to a show, that was it.
And next time we have Sarah on, we promise it'll be a video. Okay? We'll talk to you soon, folks. Take care, everybody.
Have a great Labor Day.
Thanks.
Don't forget to subscribe to the Bears Barroom Radio Network, and if you're listening in on iTunes, leave us a review. We'd appreciate it.